I'm ready.
Okay. All right. So thanks everybody for meeting today. When we left off last, we had gone over all the non-economic, non-Prop A articles, and I think we managed to get through all of those. And then we started on the Prop A items. And just to rehash, there were four, we've been calling them four buckets that we have been trying to work through with, and y'all have been doing the same. And so we actually, to recap, those four buckets included definitions, it included the G file and no longer being confidential. It also included the statute of limitations for discipline, which would go from 180 to 365 days. And then we had some language on grievances. Those were the main four buckets. And then when we got to some of the peripheral subjects, such as compelled testimony, then that's when we had the conversation last time. So since our conversation last time, I know that y'all had also taken a look at the language. Any feedback or update on that?
Yeah. All right, thank you. We're talking about Article 16, because the Prop A determining where there were conflicts fell in Article 16 protected rights, 17 disciplinary action, and Article 19 grievance. So one of the discussions from the last session was around what rights the city believed they had, or the association believed they had under Texas Local Government Code 143-312. 143 generically is the state civil service law, and 143-300 is a carve out for meet and confer for Austin and Fort Worth. And in that 312, or basically a Bill of Rights or sort of investigations. So I think we're all right. I'll say we are all right, that we can, without either party waiving their legal arguments about what can happen in the future, because we don't know all what's going to happen. And we're not preempting, except we're specifically cut out 143-312. So we have some places where we needed to preempt it to make it fit with Prop A, but I think the language you have that without waiving either party's legal arguments related to Local Government Code 143-312, the parties agree that provisions of this article shall not preempt 143-312 except as explicitly stated herein in an Article 17 of this agreement. So I think that allows us to move on. We don't know what will happen. We've said before, the ordinance is the ordinance. The city can do whatever it believes to be legal. And if we disagree, that'll all be outside this agreement anyway. It'd just be questions of what the law is. So if lets us move on from that, then that we're okay.
And what we did too, also in response to the conversation last Wednesday, is we went through Article 16 and Article 17 and Article 19, those specific Prop A articles, and did an overarching review to see where we needed to tweak here and there. And so I think that leads us to our next subject, which would be the definitions and anonymous complaints.
You want me to go?
Go ahead.
All right. So there's a list of definitions in Prop A. There's a list of definitions in 143-312. So we identified two definitions in the ordinance of which were slightly in conflict with 312. We agreed in complainant and investigation that we would use the definition from the proposition and we would preempt those specific definitions, and the definition in the contract or the definitions that are in Prop A. We had, there were some questions in anonymous complaint. Proposition, the ordinance defines anonymous complaint, and we're all right with that definition. Then there was a question as to whether or not the language that's in 143.312G, which doesn't define anonymous complaint, but mentions anonymous complaints. And there was some language in there on the police department side that a police department employee couldn't prosecute or charge an officer with an anonymous complaint unless somebody swore that it was an anonymous complaint. If it is, it is. And so there's a question, does that impede whatever the OPO is going to do? And our counter on that is that if the department is bound by this, then the OPO is bound. It's just stating I've received an anonymous complaint. That prevents false complaint. Somebody in charge over there has to say it's an anonymous complaint. Same requirement is on the police department in their investigations. And hopefully that will allow us to move forward. There is no impediment on the OPO taking anonymous complaints. It already says he or she can take them, and we've agreed on the definition. So this counter basically says same requirements that the police department has to somebody saying it's anonymous, same applies to the OPO of their.
So what I'm hearing is previously only departmental employee could intake an anonymous complaint, and at this point OPO can intake an anonymous complaint.
They're just meant, yeah, I may use different terms. The ordinance says, here's the definition. It's somebody, we don't know who it is. Okay. We don't have that identity. And in the statute, it says before an officer can be interrogated based on an anonymous complaint, the police department has to certify it is an anonymous complaint. We don't know who it is. Okay. So then the question was, if the OPO gets anonymous complaints, which they can, and they can do whatever the law allows them to do with the anonymous complaint, then somebody over there has to just certify it is an anonymous complaint. That's all. Because if it's not, then you'll have it. There may be other protected reasons not to give a name, but that's not what this is.
And this is also when it comes to the intaking of the complaint, OPO would certify that it's anonymous complaint, and then the investigation would proceed as.
Whatever
parties.
right, yeah, I'll just say whatever rights they have over there, I'm not acquiescing to what they have because some of that has not occurred. Whatever rights they have, once the OPO is certified, they can do whatever the law allows them to do. We just kind of disagree on what that expansion is, but we're not there, so. And it doesn't have anything to do with our contract. So, yes.
But that's also what's preserved when you had said above in section 1.
I'm sorry.
In section 1 of Article 16.
Yes.
We've specifically put language in there that each party
Preserves.
preserves their.
That's right. You have all the arguments to do whatever you think the law allows, of course, and we have the right to say we agree or disagree. That's outside the contract. That would be some dispute over what the authority is. So we don't know that yet. We're not in any dispute over it today. So, all right. Yeah. The only other in complaint, we did preempt it. And the only other change, complainant shall mean any person who submits a complaint. And we okay with adding, including anonymous complaint. We did preempt the definition of complainant only because it had a slight variation in what the ordinance said, but it's substantively the same thing.
And what we did is we also were more specific in our reference to 143.312 by specifying B1.
That's right. That's correct. All right. I think we don't have the critical instance not in the ordinance, but we're all right with that. There are a couple things that are just definitions in the contract that have nothing to do with pay. We're all right with that. There's one little question about firearms, and that's the departmental policy. So whatever the departmental policy is, whether it's, I guess, lethal or not. So there was nothing else. We did in the definition of investigation, we did put the preemption, which is 143.312B2. So we're just, this definition will be the definition for the contract. And it's in compliance with.
We're specifying that particular
Yes.
definition, correct?
Let's talk just a second about compelled testimony. That was our disagreement last time, but I think we, with the fix up above, preserving people's right to make that argument later, then this basically doesn't allow officers to be subpoenaed or sent to give testimony at to any individual panel, committee, group, or forum, except if they get a lawful order from the chief, then they can obey the order or challenge the order. That's yet to be determined. But if currently the chief has the authority to make that order, the extent of that and what's lawful or not is preserved up above. We don't know yet. He hadn't done it. If he does, then I guess, or she does, we don't know who the chief's going to be. All right, but then we're fine with that.
Okay.
I think we, on maintenance of records, which we just call the GFOP, we weren't apart on what happens after the effective date of this contract. After the effective date of this contract, we needed a bright line that identifies so that there were no complaints later, no, well, it should have been here, I read it this way. If alleged misconduct occurred prior to the date of this agreement, I moved it up to the top, then it'll be treated as it is under the current law, whatever that is, which means there would be a G file. After the execution of this agreement, for any misconduct that occurred after that date, then the department would not have a G file, it'd be a public record.
Correct. Yes, we were basically saying the same thing.
Yeah.
We were down to the leaves and, the nuances there.
Yeah.
And then we saw that you moved that last sentence up
It just,
chronologically.
Yeah.
We're fine with that.
Yeah. okay, so everybody has.
I think that's resolved, and I do want to comment mostly for members of the public and so forth that follow this and have their perspective on it, is that the Prop A ordinance passed by citizen initiative and then the ordinance adopted by the city council is no different than a state statute. And so some people, I think, have advocated for the effective date of Prop A being the trigger date as to when those things become open. But you can't pass a retroactive statute that changes the status of those records that existed under the former law. And that's the reason we have the effective date here, which is when this contract happens, that's what preempts those provisions. And that's the go forward date. And we're in agreement on that. But I just wanted that background that no retroactive laws is the reason that we can't go backwards and undo it in the past
No, they were city complied with the law as it was on the date.
at the time.
At the time. Right.
Hang on just one second.
Yes, ma'am.
Are we good? Okay, go ahead.
There were no other substantive things. The rest were small things over probationary officers. You've made those fit appropriately, isn't it? An officer's probation is extended, they maintain an at-will status during that. We are okay with that. All right. And the officers who are on probation have no right to appeal because they're at-will employees until such time as they've completed probation. And that's standard in all civil service laws. Some of these others we've agreed on, I don't see anything. Let's go. If we can, you want to go to 17?
Yes.
Okay. This is what we call a 365. You have the same clear line on this that we had for G-files. If an incident occurred before the date of this agreement, then that investigation will fall under the current law, which is 180 days from occurrence, or if it has a criminal element, it'll 180 days from discovery. after the execution of this agreement for misconduct which occurred after we ratified, the chief has the authority, and I'll come back to the word discipline officers for misconduct for 365 days. And that discipline occurs within 3 years of the date of incident question, which basically is, this is a statute of limitations to bring an administrative charge. It's nothing to do with criminal, nothing to do, all those are in another place. We don't bargain over it. So all of this, a lot of public misunderstanding, and even people who work on that don't always understand just the timing mechanism. Every criminal law and most civil laws have some time of which you have to act. Well, in this case, we've agreed that the chief has 365 days to bring the charge. There's no, it comes upon whenever that complaint is brought to the city, the city council member, it could be OPO, it could be whatever city agency in question, and becomes known to the chief or assistant chief. So when they know of it, that'll start the clock. So just make sure it's in the intent. If some city department employee gets this report and sits on it, the clock is ticking.
Right, and what we have done for the sake of the public is we've taken the language from Prop A that has the statute of limitations. We've put that in this section 8, subsection A, with the added language of effective upon the execution of this agreement for misconduct after such date.
Yes.
So,
It is what Prop A says, because I don't know what the drafters are thinking. We don't know who that is. But after the effective date of this agreement, clock starts. Somebody walks into the OPO's office and files a complaint with them over the police. The clock started. Not when, or if it gets known to the chief or assistant chief, the clock starts. They may not know them, but that's the clock. They have 12 months to do it. Now, what's different in this, which is not actually in the current law, is that after 36 months from the date of occurrence, 3 years from date of occurrence, you cannot bring an administrative charge. And let me go back up to the word discipline. The ordinance uses the word discipline in a very broad context. And I don't know, it's field notes, written, oral, education-based, suspensions, terminations, demotion. And so the city is insistent that you follow the ordinance by putting the word retains authority to discipline. It's our position that all of those things that fall within the definition of discipline are under the statute of limitation.
Yeah.
They're not now.
so discipline has been defined in Article 16, which tracks Prop A. And then we have the second definition of disciplinary action for things that will have to do with the notice that we've written below,
Yes.
which we can explain. So in exchange for the 365 statute of limitations, and our commitment that all the due process protections that are currently afforded remain the same, what we have added is notice after 180 days and 90 days, any additional 90 days thereafter, every 90 days thereafter, excuse me, if the investigation is going beyond the 180 days.
Let me, no, you're okay.
Yeah.
Let me make sure it's clear, okay? People get what they want. People wrote this ordinance, and we're saying exactly what the ordinance says, which is lesser rights than they had if they didn't have the ordinance. You could get brought in 20 years from now, and it passed statute of limitation. If the chief wants to give you a reprimand, they can give you a reprimand just to note that they couldn't do it under the oath. You can't do that anymore. After 3 years, you cannot file a written, you can't file a written reprimand or give a field note or education-based at the end of 3 years from date of occurrence. That's what the ordinance says. They got it, which is less than they had today because there is no timelines on non-suspendable appealable discipline. I'm not arguing, I'm saying I'm okay, but I want everybody to know, somebody come running up and go, well, we used to be able to, no, you can't. But this matches the ordinance. They get what they ask for. Now,
And just for the record, we do understand that. We
well,
formally
yes,
understand,
but
so.
there are other people watching who want to come in later and have their own interpretation. So I'm making clear between us and the city. We understand because we know more about it than the average person because we're spending our day working on it, okay? So there, now, the second part, we use the term disciplinary action in the rest of it, which is things of which you can be suspended, terminated, or demoted. So in those, and this is worked out between the parties, in going to the 365-day statute of limitations, the city has agreed that at the end of 180 days, the officer has a right to meet with the chief to see what the status of their investigation is. And they can do that 90 days after that, just to find out that the big fear of officers is being left out, unknown, when they should have already had that conducted. Can't make the chief do anything, but they can at least go in, have a meeting with you and say, why? It's been 6 months and nothing's happened. Am I getting suspended? I'm not getting suspended. That's all that is. It's a notice requirement and an obligation of the chief to meet with the association to discuss.
Right, and I want to make sure that we are also very clear and particular about the use of discipline versus disciplinary action.
Yeah.
So we use discipline in subsection A, but we also use disciplinary action in various areas of Article 16. And then in B and C of Section 8 regarding the statute of limitations and the notice that the PD will be providing after the effective date of this agreement. So I want to make sure that disciplinary action is clear versus discipline when it comes to when we're using it in the contract.
I agree. Original positions, we moved it all back to discipline, which would have made a oral reprimand, arbitration hearing, and we'll agree. I think we've defined where it is, and we use the term disciplinary action. Those are things of which the officer can be loss of pay. So,
Okay, I just want to
Mike,
make sure we
we have a
clarify that.
definition that matches it. I don't have anything else in 17. The whole thing was around the 365 days. So-
In 17, what we are agreeing to do is remove the section 20, when the reference to probationary officers, we moved that and consolidated with Article 14 and Article 17.
Yeah, I'm okay. In 19, which was just be the grievance oversight language, we've agreed that grievances under this agreement may be asserted only as to specific provisions in this agreement. Agreements may not be filed if based on the actions of the city that are within the scope of City Code Chapter 2.15 as in effect upon the execution of this agreement and consistent with this agreement. So in layman's terms, if it's in the four corners of process, then the city has to follow that. If you're operating on something of which we've not preempted or agreed to, then you're operating under the law, the ordinance or the state law. So
Let me just clarify, you're in Article 19.
I am sorry.
Okay.
I went on down to the next one. I didn't have anything else.
I was looking at section 19 of Article 17.
Let me see.
It's pretty minor. We changed one word agreement to that particular section.
I put that back in. I didn't see that. So tell me. Let me see. All right. Yeah, okay.
Okay,
I just want to make sure.
it was minor. I didn't want to
No,
pass it on.
I just looked at the big things. All right. So in 19, we're okay. I think this is meets Prop A and preserves our right to enforce our agreement for things of which we've agreed on in the four corners of this agreement. And you struck the probationary stuff there. It's not needed. You can't grieve discipline under this section. It's contract administrator.
Correct, yes.
That's all of the Prop A language.
That is what I have on our list too, is the remaining Prop A issues. Anything additional, Sarah?
I think that covers it.
That covers it.
10 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, then we'll lay out our economic. Go. We're back. We good?
We're good.
We're on.
Are we back?
Yes.
We are.
All right. I want to, before we do the economic, the one last thing. The city gave us some language 2 days ago. Its utilization of outside contractors and civilians. It's too late in the process for us to flesh that out. It's clearly negotiable. And had we had it on the table earlier, we might have worked it out. I don't want to stop the system while we try to figure out each of these. I think the city put it on. At any point, during the term, if we get a contract, during the term of this agreement, of course, the city can bring it to the association and they can talk about it. And if they reach some accord, they can put it back into the bargaining process. It doesn't preempt it from coming up again. It's just, I'm not going to be able to solve it at this moment. It's complicated and there's a lot of state law and court cases over having people work and do the same job. So my answer is we're not interested in doing it at this time. We're okay if you want to bring it in another format after this contract.
So I will say that Article 18 that you're discussing right now was part of the fiscal package that we were counting as part of the fiscal arguments. And so we had not had an opportunity to talk about fiscal until right now. So I think let's go ahead and let's listen to Article 7. When we get to Article 18, we'll have a little bit more of that conversation. We're not trying to do anything additional than what's allowed by law. But I would say let's get to that article as we move forward.
You're allowed by law to have civilians now. We don't address that hardly anywhere. You just can't have people doing the job of a police officer in violation of Lee versus Houston unless we've contractually agreed to preempt that. If we don't, you got civilians in the police department now, probably 30% of every police department civilians. We're not arguing. If you think you got a job that's not in conflict with the state law, well, then go ahead and do it. So you only need us if you are in conflict with the law and you need us to preempt it. So we're not interested in preempting it. You go do whatever you think you can do. People civilianize jobs every day. There are places where we have bargained it in, but they are replacing police jobs, not creating a new position. They've taken jobs the police were doing, the union agreed, those jobs did not require a sworn officer. So you're welcome to lay it out. I'm telling you, I'm not inclined to do it.
And just to respond that it's last minute, we just haven't gotten to the fiscal yet. So that is why it has not been brought up yet.
Still last minute, but I'll accept your right to argue that the fact I haven't seen it until a few days ago, it's last minute. But I appreciate your right to say it.
And I think once we get there, that you'll be happily surprised. We are not looking for you to preempt Lee versus Houston at all, So
So
once
you're
we get there-
withdrawing it?
No, we're not looking to preempt Lee versus Houston. We're just looking for prior jobs that may have been non-sworn in compliance with Lee versus Houston, that may have been done by officers, but didn't have to be done by officers under Lee versus Houston.
But Sarah, what
So-
do you need our permission for? You have the right to do.
Exactly. The only permission that we're asking for is that you waive past practices in relation to that.
Uh.
I'll let Becky lay that out in our 18, but we're not, it isn't what it sounds like.
Yeah, and I
So
think-
he'll be pleasantly
Yeah,
surprised.
may
It
I?
would be.
Yeah, may I?
Well,
Yeah, because I think what Sarah is explaining is that, just like you said earlier, we have the ability to civilianize. And Lee versus Houston is the standard, and we think we can comply with it. And that's just the conversation we wanted to have, because, and as she's mentioned, the past practice dynamic, there are these implicit contract provisions that may go beyond Lee versus Houston. Maybe all we'd ask you to do is to say that Lee versus Houston and not past practice is the standard. So anyway, we'll talk about that. And if it's not something y'all can do, then I'm sure you'll tell us.
I think I have, but I will restate it.
I'm planning on
We'll cover
changing,
again when we get to 18.
planning on changing your mind, but sometimes I'm disappointed.
A lot of people are. Go ahead, Sergeant.
All right, so we've laid out pretty much everything in the contract. We're down to the last little bit. Before I jump into what the Police Association is proposing to the city on the economic issues, I just want to cover just a couple things. Obviously, we all know the climate here in Austin when it comes to finances. Everywhere in the country is more expensive than it has been. Austin is no exception to that. Austin is no exception to housing costs being one of the highest in the state. And what we're trying to do is be able to present a package that I'm about to lay out that will deal with one of the even bigger issues, and that's our staffing crisis. We know the department is hurting bad for officers. As of last week, we're at just over 500 officers short for the Austin Police Department, including the 150 positions that were cut in 2020 during the defund the police movement. How do we fix that? How do we get people back to signing up for the Austin Police Department? I think you could ask the officers here at the table or any of our members that have been here for a while that when I applied for the department, there were thousands of people knocking on the door of Austin PD to try to get on. And a couple hundred were on a list, and my class had 91 that were accepted off that list. If you talk to recruiting now, they can't get 100 people in the door. Lots of reasons for that. And so how do we make some of those reasons more, we incentivize these people, these qualified people to come to Austin to serve the great community that we have here to keep Austin safe. And that's kind of what we're laying out here of one way that we can do that to help with recruiting. It also is a way to incentivize people to stay. Officers that are here to not leave here for some small surrounding jurisdiction or some other place in the state or country to move on, that they know that they're appreciated and rewarded for being here and dealing with the big city ills, as Ron likes to say, of problems and things that happen only in high density, large metropolitan areas that take extremely high training and practice to handle. And so that's the reason we're laying out this package. So I'm going to jump in. In Article 7 is wages and benefits. What we've proposed to the city, this covers a 5-year term. And so I have 5 years of base pay, base wages, starting with the first year of being a 12% raise for Austin police officers. And then each additional year after that is a 5% raise, is what you'll see laid out in each one of the fiscal years. These would, our proposal is to start October 1st, 2024, with that 12% increase in base wages.
So do you want us to ask questions as you go along, or do you want us to kind of lay it out and then ask questions? Because our finance people are watching on TV so that they can help cost this, and they had a couple of questions kind of diving in as you go. So
Sure.
what's
Jump, you can throw out some questions.
so base pay reflects a 12% increase to base wages from what? Is that today's pay? Is
From the
that the
current-
last pay
the current
scale?
pay scale that we are operating.
Okay, so there's not a current pay scale per se. It's in addition to the last pay scale from the contract. So you're saying current base wages.
Didn't you raise the base wages?
It was, but there's not a pay scale that we have, in other words.
We,
So you're
We
talking
have a pay
the
scale.
old pay scale plus the increases that have been given by ordinance. That's your starting.
Yes, what officers are currently getting paid right now
Okay,
as their base wages.
I'm presuming that. I just want to make sure because,
I'm pretty sure we have a pay scale from the city for that ordinance, those increases.
okay, well, it's not the appendix, so.
Not from the last
Appendix A,
contract.
which
There is
reflects the ordinance
an
increases.
ordinance increase.
99% sure. I just want to be
Yeah.
absolutely clear for our
No
people who
problem.
are costing.
Yeah, we want to make sure we're starting on the same Same mark.
Right.
No, that's good. Okay, so like I said, and then each additional year is a 5% increase on those. If you'll notice in the language we sent over, one of the other things that we are proposing to the city is, we'll call it a patrol stipend. It's the second paragraph, section 1A, second paragraph, if you're looking at the language. And what we're gonna do is, this would be getting the second year, effective the second year of the contract.
Okay, wait, can we go back to 1A?
Yeah.
So the 3% step increase will be added at year 23 on the first full pay period after the effective date of this agreement. Is that the change in the pay scale?
That is the
has
change from the
already been made,
ordinance.
Or is that an additional 3% to be
That is-
accumulated
that
to
is-
6%?
That is putting in the contract what that ordinance.
Okay,
That's a differential.
okay, so that's, okay,
On the year 23, that's what you're
gotcha,
asking.
yeah,
All right,
exactly.
so the paragraph before that is the patrol, what I'll call the patrol stipend, okay? And what this is, right now, the police department, the men and women that are out on the street taking those 911 calls are our patrol officers. They have the hardest schedules, they have the hardest job, and they're the backbone. If you ask any department, the backbone of their department is patrol officers. Without them responding to the 911 calls, going to those crash scenes, going to those murder scenes, going to those sexual assault scenes, going to everything that you call the police for when you pick up and you call 911 and you have officers show up, those are our patrol officers that are going there. And so in a way to incentivize people not only to be on patrol, that's where everyone starts, but to keep them on patrol. So they're not looking for maybe that promotion out of patrol or that specialized unit off of patrol. To incentivize and reward those for staying, we're proposing that officers, corporals, and sergeants assigned to patrol with at least 4 years of seniority. And then we list out the specific shifts that the department uses. Those are the patrol shifts. Those are all the sectors and the patrol shifts listed. That they would also receive an additional base wage of 5% per month that they are assigned to patrol. This does not include specialized or support units. This is just targeting the men and women on patrol in a way to keep them on patrol. This is not the rookie out the door. This is someone that has seniority. These are the people we want to keep on the street. These are the ones that are our FTOs, our experienced mental health officers, our people that have the most training, that have been dealing with the patrol work and know how to do it and be able to provide that knowledge and expertise to those new officers. And we want to help incentivize and keep them on patrol and reward them for staying on patrol when they could go look for something that maybe just has a better schedule than what patrol does with rotating onto weekends or nights or evenings. So that's one of the other elements of a base wage increase.
We do have a question here. If somebody is removed from one of these patrol sectors or shifts, do they lose that 5%?
Yes,
Yes.
They
it
do.
is only for those assigned to that shift, working that shift. If they move, so let's say we sign a contract tomorrow and next year they're working patrol and 3 months later they move to name the specialized unit or name the promotion to move off the street, they do not get that base wage anymore.
It covers, everybody talks about patrol being the backbone of the department, but it's not treated that way. It's not just Austin, everywhere. So people come, the first few years, they can't go anywhere anyway, but after they've been on about 4 years, they can start bidding out to other jobs in the police department. They may give them weekends off, because this is where all the critical incidents occur. I would guess that 99% of all complaints come in this little pocket, because they're on the street. They're the first person to deal with the public and all these critical incidents. And we also want to keep sergeants and corporals who can bid out and find lots of other skilled jobs, that if they stay here, it's worth it and they get paid for that. If they want to bid out, well, they'll just bid out, but go somewhere, it's okay. But we won't pay them while they're out there on that. And we think it'll make a lot of people stop, because going out to a special unit they may be making less money than if they stayed on the street. So we think it would really energize and give the people who do the hardest job, we actually pay them, as opposed to just saying, oh, you're the backbone, but you're better off if you find a place to get out of patrol. You know, anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And let me be clear, we are in the midst of budget, so our finance people are at City Hall, but they are watching and they are sending questions,
Okay.
just to be able to cost it and not in an argument, they don't care, right? It's not argumentative, it's just they actually want to be able to cost it out to see what it means. So the question is, on this particular one, is the 5% on an hourly rate change, or is it a stipend to the current pay wage?
5% base wage increase. Those officers while they're on patrol, with
Okay.
4-year seniority for officers, corporals, and sergeants. And the reason we included, like Ron said, the corporals and sergeants, an officer can't leave anywhere. They're assigned to patrol for 4 years. So, once you hit 4 years, then you can start bidding out and trying to put in for specialized units or wherever else you want to go in your career, and that's fine. But those that choose to stay, and those are the ones we're trying to target, because they're the ones that are able to leave. Sergeants and corporals, obviously they already have 4 years in seniority. There's no incentive for them to stay on that patrol shift. Some of them like it, but there's some that shifts that they have a carousel of corporals that go through. So what we're trying to do is maybe incentivize people to stay on that shift and provide, the sergeant and corps will provide that leadership and that knowledge base that is very beneficial for the department and for our officers. As we go down, longevity pay, we didn't make any changes from past contracts. It's still $107 per year of service up to 25 years. The next change we made is field training officer. This is something that our department is struggling with right now. Field training officers are a voluntary position in the sense that you have to want to be a field training officer. We don't make people be field training officers, because the last thing you want is someone forced to train your new officers. We find officers that are willing and want to train officers, and then we have provided them a stipend based on them performing that duty. I was a field training officer. I love being a field training officer. That was years ago, and we're still at the same amount we have been for many, many years. We haven't had an increase. It's currently at $175 a month.
It's a fixed amount, but it goes up based on pay step 10. Yeah.
We will,
Yeah.
yes, getting there. So currently, it's $175 is what people are getting right now, and it's been that for, well, since I've started here at least. What we are proposing is to move to a percentage based off of a police officer step 10 pay per month. So 4.5% of a police officer step 10 pay per month. That's currently about $350 a month stipend.
And not currently $245 under the ordinance that was passed.
It might be more under the ordinance. I don't know what the ordinance says on it. So, but what we've had in contracts is 175. So we're adjusting based on what what we had under contract. Just some other numbers to throw out there. Houston's at 300, San Antonio's 275, Corpus is 300, Plano's 840 a month. Fort Worth is 10% with a minimum of $700 a month. So we're behind what our past contracts have been, well behind everybody. And so we're trying to move up and trying to incentivize, because our issue has been people not wanting to be FTOs. We have a certain allotted number that the department is allowed to have, and we don't even have all of those positions filled because people don't want to be them. So we're trying to incentivize and make it a little more appealing for an officer to be like, I will take that work, because it is a lot of work when you're a field training officer, especially in the first couple months of field training. Third month may be a little bit less, but you're still responsible for that officer. You're really taking a supervisory role with that officer, and you're responsible for everything they do and making sure that they have taken all the stuff they've learned in the academy and applied it correctly and properly and legally on the street dealing with the public. And so this is a way to try to incentivize those officers to come back to being field trained officers if they've left, or or sign up to be a field training officer.
I have a question for costing purposes. In that particular section, section 3, field training officer pay, there was a second paragraph that specifically said that this payment shall not be made to officers assigned to the training division or to the FTO program coordinator. Officers authorized to train probationary patrol officers during the probationary period and not part of the FTO program will be compensated for the actual hours spent training. So in past language, the training division, the FTO program coordinator were excluded. Is the intent to include them now so we can make sure we cost that?
Sorry, what paragraph are you reading?
There, it's not in your proposal that you sent us, but when I looked back at the 2018 contract, just to kind of see what was different, that particular paragraph has been removed in y'all's proposal. And you can answer me later. I'm just bringing it to your attention for costing purposes.
Yeah, what we have submitted is what we're submitting for right now.
Okay.
Mental health pay, we didn't make any changes to that from the past contract. We also kept, we set a date. I know we had a date because eventually I know the department is moving to where they're not going to be specific mental health. Every officer will be a certified mental health officer. And so the stipend won't be necessary anymore because everyone will be a certified mental health officer. We've kept that language in there. If the city still makes, or the department still makes good with that plan to move in that direction, then that's still there. Bilingual pay, we made one increase for those officers that are certified Spanish-speaking officers. The other languages that are approved will remain at $175 a month, but we increased Spanish to $245 a month. And the reason for that is because Spanish-speaking officers are used way more than any other language. In Austin, there's a lot of people who speak Spanish, and those officers are the ones that are called, they probably handle 95% at least of the foreign language calls for service because most of them are going to be Spanish-speaking officers that are needed. So that's the increase there. Section 6 was the compensation for lieutenants and commanders. We didn't make any changes to that from previous contracts. Assistant chiefs the same. Clothing allowance, we kept the same at $500 a year. For education and certificate pay in section 9. Certificate pay, that's for TCOL certificates. As you advance in the police department in training, you move up in what TCOL certificate you earn, and you are, so the highest is a master peace officer license. We didn't make any changes to what is currently the way that is set up, and made it so it's the same prices as before, and then also the same restrictions on you can only get one, right? So education, then we get into education incentive. That's something that the department and is better served by having officers that have educations, and the higher the better. And so in order to incentivize that, we did have a slight increase into those. So for those with an associate's degree, it would be $150 a month, bachelor's degree $300 a month, and master's degree $380. So
We did add doctorate in the previous.
oh yes, so master,
Right.
yes, master's or doctorate. Sorry, thank you. Was $380. That's just in that last, combined in that last one. Then we get into shift differential. So one of the things we worked on was to look at where staffing is and schedules, and we've moved from what was a flat rate for a shift differential and have moved it to a percentage based shift differential. And you'll notice there are two shift differentials. So the first one is an additional 6% per month to an officer normally assigned to a night shift. And this is for a shift that begins after 5 p.m. Is what the department classifies as night shift. And so that is a 6% increase into their pay for that. And that is slightly higher than evening shift. Before they were both the same, but we split it to 6% for nights and 4.5% for evening shift. One of the places that the department struggles to keep people is on night shift. Not very many people enjoy working nights. It screws with everything about your sleep patterns and your body and your family life outside of work schedules. And so trying to reward those officers who work nights and keep them there, especially that go into those corporals and sergeants who, again, they may get promoted and get assigned to a night shift, but they quickly are looking for somewhere else. This may help incentivize them to stay and reward them for being on a night shift. If you go down a little bit, we also added that last paragraph in there where officers, corporals, detectives, and sergeants that are not assigned to patrol division, but are ordered to backfill in the patrol division for at least 120 hours in a 90-day backfill cycle shall receive the shift differential. So what that is right now, because of our patrol staffing, the department has ordered anyone who's not on patrol, any officer, corporal, or detective who is not on patrol, that they are required to go and work backfill shifts on patrol. So homicide detectives, robbery detectives, district representatives, special events, whatever it is, they have to take time away from their normal schedule and sign up for currently, I believe it's 5 this time. It was 6. The department did reduce it to 5 on this round. But this was just kind of a buffer. So that way to say, hey, if they get to the point where they're working 12 shifts out of their, in that 90-day period, that they are going to be able to qualify for the shift differential. And they work in evening shifts. So it would be an evening shift differential. They work a noon to 10 when they work backfill. So that's just right now like I said, we're only at 5 days. So this would be if the department got to 12 days, that would kick in. So to try to compensate these officers, detectives, and corporals who are having to adjust everything that they can qualify for that shift differential if they reach that point. The rest of that is pretty much the same. I believe it's all the same as past contracts. We still have the officer residency incentive pay that is in there if council should decide they want to do that. They haven't done it yet, but we have kept it there as an option for city council should they decide they want to do that.
Can you go back to section 10 for just a second?
Section 10, yes.
Just trying to. I may have a question on that later. I'm trying to figure out my comments from downtown. So I'll let you know. Go ahead.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, anytime. And once we go through all this, any questions, we can go back, hit anything, and we can take a break and y'all put it, what that's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, Article 8 is overtime on call, court time and callback. So let's note here. I have some notes here. Down choose. 1 second. Gotta switch it over. All right, in this one, we made a couple changes. One of them in section 1 in Article C, we said that basically kind of, right now the department works off a MOU to offer double time to officers who work night shifts or support shift or shifts that start after 5 p.m. And so one of the things that we did is to go and just kind of put that in there to that it basically authorizes the chief. So if the chief wants to continue this premium pay rate, that the chief is allowed to determine by the chief. So basically what the MOU says, we're just putting it in the contract, giving the chief the authority to implement that if they see fit. The other thing that's is also in A of section 1, and that all approved paid leave time other than sick leave shall be calculated as hours worked for overtime purposes. This is was taken out of the contract, but then the chief has put it back and authorized all leave right now because of our staffing issues. And so we have put it back in the contract that officers time for overtime will be calculated, all paid time except for sick time. For on-call, we did make a change. So normally on-call, this is for an officer or detective or whoever, whatever rank they are, whatever employee they are, who has been assigned to be on call, whether it's for an investigative unit. They're basically saying that I'm going to be ready to respond back to a scene or investigation when I'm called. And for being in that status, in the past, they have been given 8 hours of comp time. We have increase that to 10 hours of comp time per week. That also just matches the schedule that officers work. We work 4 10s. And so basically they earn 10 hours, which is enough for a day off. And they earn 10 hours of vacation. We also put in there that for officers that are on call, they can choose. They can either take 10 hours of comp time that week that they're on call, or by notifying their supervisor prior to that scheduled on call, they can also take a $5 per hour when on call and not working regular scheduled duty or overtime assignments. So what does that mean? If an officer works there 40 hours a week, then they would get 5 hours for every hour they're not working for being on call. So that would be up to $640 per week of on call. Now, if they work any overtime, let's say they work 30 hours of overtime, that would subtract 30 hours from that calculation, and it would be less than that. But that would be up to, that's the most they could get based on the amount of hours that are in a week.
So at what point would they make that election?
Before they complete their timesheet. So every week when you go on call, you've got a mark on your timesheet that you put your on call. Right now, you would put that I'm on call, and then you get 8, and that's where. So on there, they would put now under this they would put 10, or we would have to have HR will figure out whatever code they want, and they would earn this, and then it would. And in the new UKG system, it tracks all your overtime for that week too, so it'd be an even easier calculation to figure out how many hours not worked.
Okay, and are you suggesting it would be one or the other, or could the officer make an option of some this and some that?
One or the other each week. So for our SWAT guys who are on call basically every week, 1 week they may take on call the 10-hour comp time. The next week they may choose to take whatever, but they just have to decide that before and put it on their timesheet.
Okay, and so then I'll probably come back with a question on that. Get it.
No problem.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, all right. Court time, we've kept the same, where officers will get 3 hours of overtime if they are called back into court when they are not on duty. Same restrictions, if it's an hour before, it's an hour. If it's after their hours, then they get up to 3. At least 3. Obviously, if you're in court for 6 hours, you get 6 hours. And the same for callback is no changes there. Still 3 hours for compensation for if you're called in prior to 1 hour before your regular shift, and you get a minimum of 3 hours. Okay. We've already had laid out Article 9 in the very first thing. The only thing that really changed within Article 9 and is a fiscal consideration for what the city has told us is just military leave, and that we're proposing that a military leave is up to 200 hours of paid military leave per federal fiscal year. 120.
120.
There's been some debate over what the city was doing at 150, and then they went to 120. There's been some debate over the calculation methods. So we're proposing just a 200-hour military leave. When we get down to Article 10, in Section 1 it was just Christmas as a special pay rate. We've added Thanksgiving to also be included to go along with December 25th, but also the 4th Thursday of November, which is Thanksgiving, to be paid at the 1/2 their regular hour rate for all hours actually worked their entire shift. Seniority is still the same. The vacation accrual rate is the same. We did in Section 4, we've increased our leave banks. We haven't increased payout. But we've just increased the bank for what you can. in past, and currently you're able to bank 400 hours, up to 400 hours of regular vacation time. We've upped that to 600. One of the reasons for that is with our staffing shortage, some people are not able to take time off like they would like because staffing on patrol shift is short, and so they're getting denied vacation. What we don't want is for them to lose hours earned. So it just increases the bank that they can accrue. Obviously, anything over 600 they would lose, but it just gives them a little bit more buffer to accrue that time. Again, it does not increase the amount the city would pay out upon separation of retirement or whatever. That's still set at 240 for regular vacation. For exceptional vacation, we increased it from, right now it's currently at 160 hours. Sorry, yep.
Okay, so the increase in the accrual, I just want to make clear, there are actually officers who are being denied vacation and are unable to take that, and that's why you're extending the cap. Is that what I'm hearing?
That is one of the reasons, yeah.
I just want to make sure.
If the cap, like I said, it just means your bank gets bigger. Doesn't mean you get paid more if you separate, you just lose more time.
Yeah, I just want to
But
make
just,
sure.
we do have units that their shifts are very tight to be able to take off. And there are units that lose hours all the time because of whether it's exceptional or vacation, because they just are not able to take off. For exceptional vacation, like I said, it was 160. We've bumped that to 200. That's for the bank. And again, that's still the payout of 160 hours, doesn't change the payout. For sick leave, I know under ordinance, they had bumped it back up to 6.25 hours of accrual under the ordinance. We've put it back in at 6.08 for accrual of sick time. That's what it has been. Historically, that's also part of the way that we get to ABL. That's officers take a little bit less sick time to help cover some of the ABL stuff. So that goes back to what that is. All right, we have a new proposal here, different from past contracts. Just flip over here. And this is a sick leave buyback program. I believe it's, Christopher, is it Fire? Fire has a similar, right? Yeah, okay. Similar to what's been proposed in other ones, but this is a proposal. Basically, during the first year of this agreement, the city will budget $1 million for a sick leave buyback to be awarded on a first come, first served basis. If the employee elects as allowed under this section, then they can kind of apply for a buyback. This goes for sworn officers. It'll be awarded every 6 months, each 6 month period during that first year. And they can get up to 20 hours each time so basically sell some of their sick time back to the city. We did put a couple restrictions in there. First, that members, to be able to qualify, must have at least 800 hours in their sick bank before they can apply. So what we tried to do there is limit. We don't want a brand new officer who only has 40 hours of sick time to sell back 20 hours of sick time and then get in a bind when they get sick. We still want people to have that ability to take sick time, whether it's or they have to go on FMLA and can use up to 480 hours for that. We want to make sure that people, before they're selling stuff, they have what they need to take care of themselves and issues that may come up, so they're not out of time when some sort of emergency happens. Like I said, it's every 6 months during that first year, and then after that, then it's up to the city manager after that first year if they want to continue the program. And then if they want to continue each year, the city manager can choose. And if they want to budget for it, they can do it every year of the contract should they choose. But it's only our proposal right now is just a first year that it's there. After that, based on the budget, and if the city manager wants to offer it as a incentive for officers to be able to sell some of that time that they've earned back.
So you're saying that your proposal is that it'd be mandatory in the first year and optional in the rest of the term?
Yes. And I'll say, and that's in the second paragraph of that, section 6 is where it says that it's the city manager's sole discretion to continue it. And if they decide to do it in any subsequent year, it does not bind them to do it every other year. So it's a year by year basis. They decide each year of the contract after the first one, if they want to do it or not. I think that's it for 10.
Yeah, could we have 1 second for a question?
Sure.
From your language, it at least appears that you believe that the city would get some benefit from this if you leave it at the city manager's discretion. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, we're not tying down the city to that every year they have to. Is that what you're asking? Like, why would
Well, no,
we make it?
Get out of it.
What you think the motivation would be?
So this
for the city
is something that the city has done, or the department has offered a sellback program through the chief in the past, and it applied to kind of guys that were further on in their career in a way to incentivize them to stay. So they could they could basically sell some time back. This opens it up a little bit more to what was available in the other program, and it just isn't an incentive for officers. This is more of a retention tool for officers to be able to be like, hey, because to get to 800, you're going to be a more senior officer to be able to even qualify for that. And if people have used a bunch of sick time, they may be a 25-year officer and still not have 800 hours of sick time in there. So that's why we geared it towards more senior officers to retain them for, hey, you can at least get a little bit here. All right, then we get down to Article 11. And in Article 11, we've got a few things. Let me go actually.
You nine?
9.
16.
9. See. Okay, sorry, I skipped over and I had it cut out on my copy. I'm set back up to Article 9. I just wanted to cover the payment of sick leave on separation. So separate from the the buyback program. That is language that has been in past contracts. We're not proposing any changes, still up to 1,700 hours upon separation. As long as you meet the minimum requirements. If you burn too much time in your last couple of years, then it drops down to 1,400. Still the same language that we've had in past contracts, so that does not change anything there.
I did.
As you mentioned.
I can't remember if I did or not, so I wanted to
Kind
make
of,
sure,
yeah, same.
I didn't
I did
miss
notice,
it.
I did notice a change in the PSUM officers in that same section.
What are you talking about?
Back in Article 9 or in?
Back in Article
That
9,
was the-
Section 3.
That was in the red line draft.
Okay.
There was a discrepancy. It was punishing those in this because they had a different accumulation, is my understanding. This calculates, they get to count their years of service because they work for the city as a police officer, just not the police department. There are just a few people left, I believe. So they get the same calculation based on their reaching whatever 16 years.
Yeah, I think they added that just to help clarify. It was, the city gave it to them. I don't think there was anybody that didn't get the payout, but this just clarifies to make sure that that there's no question. We don't have to have that discussion with the city.
They were a park officer for 5
Park
years.
officer, airport officer, that counts towards their getting to that 16
16-year number.
or whatever else on
Okay, I
separation.
just want to make sure I
Yes,
added
Nope,
to your
thank you,
question.
thank you. All right, now I'll jump down to 11. All right, so association business leave is Article 11. Cleaned up a little bit of the language, but the most part for the beginning is very similar to what it is, establishing association leave for the president, establishing for committee chairs or other people on full-time release to the association, and that they are able to have this bank of association business leave hours to do that. The big change that we're proposing now is in C for full-time association positions. And in there, we basically took down and broke down each, like every chunk of numbers of officers. So you'll see how many officers we have, how many hours would be granted if we're within that window, and how many full-time positions would be granted based on the staffing numbers. So it's an increasing scale based on what number of staffing level we're at. We're currently at a 1450-ish, somewhere right around there, in members. So that would put us in number 5, which would be 10,000 hours of ABL and 5 time. But if we keep dropping and we get down below to 1,200, then we would lose a full-time position. Part of the argument for that is to for the association to be able to function more efficiently and provide the services that we need to our members with the staff needed to serve all of them. We also have some things in this contract, whether it's in relation to notification for G-File or DRHs and all of that stuff, where the current number of people we have is just not enough to meet all of those requirements. And to help the city, we work as an association, we really do to try to do everything we can to help the department and to work to make things better at the department, and wherever the department, I can't hardly think of a time when the department calls upon the association saying, hey, we need help with this, that we don't jump on it and say, yeah, we're here to help and we'll jump on that. So this helps provide that opportunity to better serve our members.
And just to be clear, I'm reading and hearing this as actual members versus budgeted FTE, correct?
I'm sorry, actual, yes,
Actual
yes, I got what you're saying,
versus
yes.
budget
So the
50.
people we actually have working, like right now, we're authorized 1809, 1811, 1812. We're not using that number, we're using actual people at the department.
Okay, and also earlier you had talked about the 6.8, going back to that number and this having to do with that. Is there like a calculation you could send me at some point?
Calculation for like how much time that is?
Yes.
Like, I can probably come up with.
Okay, well, or I can work with you.
Then obviously that we have very similar language. I don't really think we made really many changes or any changes really to like officer conduct on ABL. Obviously, people on ABL still have to follow the policy of the department, and they're employees of the department. One thing that we did put in there is a correction or an addition in, it is all the way down right before section 4. It's in section 3, so it's G. ABL usage shall be considered productive work hours for all purposes. Part of the reason we did that was to fix an issue we had with those that are on ABL time, that then they were not qualifying for FMLA. And so if they got sick, they had a baby, needed FMLA time, they weren't qualifying because they weren't saying that ABL was productive time on the way the city calculates it. So what that does is fix that issue to make that possible. That also means that those officers, if they're on ABL and have enough time, it would impact their ability to use the city paternity leave, paid maternity, paternity leave, where they get 6 weeks paid by the city. They weren't qualifying for that either, because in order to qualify for that, you have to qualify for FMLA. So they weren't qualifying for that city benefit. So we've added that language to try to help fix that loophole there.
Okay, are you suggesting in any way, and I literally just thinking this, so I may be completely off, that you could get overtime pay for working more ABL hours than 40 hours a week?
We don't, if, for someone on ABL,
Or
when we work ABL, let's say I'm a full-time release at the association, I put 40, now I'm there the whole time. I put 40 hours ABL on there. If I work 60 hours at the association, I don't get overtime for that extra 20 hours because that's association business. Now, if I go work a patrol shift, then I would get overtime for that. And that's currently how they handle it now. So
That's not a change.
that's not a change. So we're not saying if I work 60 hours at the association that I get 20 hours of overtime from the city. That's my volunteer time beyond 40 for association business.
Okay, so when we're talking productive work hours for all purposes, FMLA, parental leave, any other examples that come to mind? I'm just trying to kind of think it through. And I'm not limiting you by this conversation.
Yeah,
I'm just trying
you're
to think of
through it.
how your thought process is working here.
There have been some other discussions, but I think we were able to get some clarification from the city on past first current practices in regard to administrative leave. And what that looks like now, that it is considered productive. And I think we've received all that we need in regards to that, that is considered productive.
Okay, we might have a couple more questions on this one, but.
Yeah. And then we've kept the language on ABL use for legislative political activities. That they'll be limited at the local level. The use of ABL for legislative and political activities should be limited to raising concerns regarding officer safety. ABL should not be used for legislative or political activities related to any election, public officials, or city charter amendments. This keeps in line with a past practice of ABL. To make sure that what we're doing is association business, and which our job is to fight for the wages, work conditions of officers. And then on this one, we have, this is one of those mini evergreens in section 5 where we've added that this applying to this article will be a 24-month from the expiration of the agreement. I think we'll jump to, I think it's at 18 that has the next,
Special things.
yes. So for 18, for most of it is the same, same language through the beginning until you get to about section 5, where we get to special event assignments. So in there, we have there's a list of names of different events, and we wanted to just pick it up. Do we add it on our proposal? We wanted to add Austin City Limits Festival into there to be considered as part of this special event, just because of how big it is and how big it has become. Then you jump down into C, where it talks about special event stipend for lieutenants and commanders. Now, under contract, lieutenants and commanders go back to salary employees, so not eligible for a normal overtime pay rate. One of the issues that has been brought to us by our special events staff is with our shortage, we just cannot fill the required positions that are needed to work all of these special events. That's soccer games, football games, Moody Center, all these different traffic assignments, all these different things that the city contracts with these providers and these event staff, and say, hey, we will provide the law enforcement and the safety required at these events, and we are struggling to fill those because we just don't have the staffing numbers to do it. And so what we have proposed is for reimbursed special events only. Reimbursed special events only. So this is where ABC company says, I want to have an event on 6th Street and close the street, and I'm going to pay the city for that. And the city says, this is the cost. I need one officer each end of the street. This is what it costs. And then that event pays the city. So that's the reimbursed money. It's not coming from city dollars. This is money that they are collecting from the event that is happening. That they would make it possible for lieutenants and commanders to be able to work that event if they're not able to fill. They then open it up, right now, since lieutenants and commanders are hourly outside of contract. Special events will open up events to officers, corporals, detectives. If they can't fill, then they open it to sergeants. And then if they can't fill, they open to lieutenants and commanders. So it's kind of the same process, but since they're salary under a contract, this then provides this. So what they would do is they would receive if they work one of these events, they would receive their straight time for the hours that they actually work of the event. And let's say they work for a 4-hour event, they would get their straight time hourly rate for that. And then they would also receive a stipend listed, which is for 0 to 4 hours to be $150 for the event or on a scale up. And so that's a solution that our special event staff is in desperate need of to be able to fill these positions, especially as our staffing numbers shrink. Hopefully our staffing numbers will turn and we'll start hiring more and growing again. And then they won't even need, there won't even be an opportunity to open that to lieutenants and commanders because officers will fill it. All right, then the other change that we have is down in the reserve officer program, which is section G, or, G in that article. G, right, yeah. It's like the last page of the article. We put in there some restrictions for reserve officers, when it comes to, not restrictions for reserve officers, but the way to hire. So normally, like I said, what they do is open it to officers, corporal detectives, and if that doesn't fill it for certain spots, then they open it to reserves and sergeants and whoever else. So we say you still do that. Sometimes what happens, and we just got an email, I think today for some of them for an event, they still can't fill that position after they've had it open. And what they'll do is they'll talk to the event, or they'll talk to the city, or they'll talk to whoever, and they will increase to a premium rate, usually double time for that event. And what we have put in here is language that says if the event turns into a premium rate event, that the city will offer it to officers first again, let them know, hey, there's a premium rate, and open it back up to officers prior to opening it back up to reserve officers. Not kicking anybody off, you already signed up. Just, hey, now we still have 4 spots. They're now double time. Officers, you get first dibs. If you don't sign up, then we're opening it to reserve officers and they will hop in there for that premium. And that is, I believe, all of our, not correct, anything that I missed, guys?
Okay. I think we should caucus first and make sure we would probably like to caucus right now, make sure we've gotten all the questions that we need to ask y'all for the fiscal.
Okay.
And then also take into account some of the comments you've provided regarding the civilian language that we just discussed.
Okay. Just a little break, or you want to do like a lunch break, too, or what do we?
What time is it?
It's 12:15.
12, 16.
Let's do a lunch break. That'll give us a chance to talk to the finance people and make sure if we have any.
Yeah, get all your questions that you have.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so just let us know when you're ready.
Is that on the main one, or we need
It is 12:16. Let's,
to be more flexible?
yeah, let's touch base in an hour at 1:15.
Okay.
And text and see if we can come back with that at 1:30.
Sounds great.